It's 6:58 on a Sunday morning, and you're sitting at your kitchen table with a mug of coffee that's already gone lukewarm. Your phone buzzes, a notification from a social app you barely use. Derek just bought a house. You know Derek. You've known Derek for 11 years. Same industry, similar salary, similar age. You look at the photo, a two-story colonial with a bay window, and something tightens in your chest that you don't have a name for yet. You're 36. Your checking account has $1,140 in it. Your retirement account, the one you opened at your first job and forgot about, has $6,200 in it. You've never made a will. You've never met with a financial advisor. You don't actually know what a Roth IRA is, not really, not in a way you could explain to someone else. You close the app. Here's the part nobody tells you. This morning, this exact, unremarkable, coffee-going cold morning, is the one that ends up mattering more than any of the ones that came before it. You don't know that yet. You just know you're tired of feeling behind. Level 1. The late start. You've always told yourself there'd be time. Time to figure out money once things settled down, once the promotion came, once you paid off the car. The car is a 2013 Honda Civic with 141,000 miles on it. It rattles at highway speed. You've been meaning to fix that for 2 years. On Monday, you do something small. You open the banking app on your phone during your lunch break, sitting in that same rattling Civic in the parking lot, and you set up an automatic transfer. $150 a month. It feels almost embarrassingly small. Derek's mortgage payment is probably 10 times that. But $150 is what's left after rent, after the car payment, after the number on the electric bill that keeps creeping up. You don't tell anyone. That evening, your friend Paul calls to catch up. Paul is 58, 2 cubicles down from where you used to sit before you switched teams. He mentions, almost as an aside, that he started putting money away at your age too. 36, he says. I remember it exactly. I put in $100 and felt like an idiot. You ask him how much he has now. He doesn't answer directly. He just says, enough that I stopped worrying about it a few years ago. You don't ask again, but you think about it for 3 days. The following week, a $640 dental bill shows up, a crown you'd been putting off. 2 years ago, this would have gone on a credit card without a second thought. This time, you open the account you almost forgot you had, $312 sitting untouched since a bonus 18 months ago. You use half of it. You feel the sting of watching a number go down, but nothing catches fire. No card gets maxed. No interest starts accumulating in the background like a slow leak in the wall. That's the first time you understand, even faintly, what an emergency fund is actually for. Not abstract security, a dental bill that doesn't become a crisis. By the end of the month, you've automated 3 things: $150 into a retirement account, $75 into a separate savings account, and you've canceled 2 subscriptions you forgot you were paying for. $61 a month, recovered from nothing. It doesn't feel like wealth. It feels like noticing, for the first time, where the money was actually going. Level 2, the boring math. 2 years pass. Nothing dramatic happens in them. That's the part that surprises you most. There's no windfall, no lucky stock pick, no inheritance. Just the same $150 transfer, now grown to $310 after 2 modest raises, leaving your account on the same day every month, going into the same handful of index funds you researched carefully over one long Saturday afternoon. You're 38 now. The Civic still rattles. You still haven't fixed it. Derek gets a boat. Not a big one, a used pontoon boat he found online, but a boat nonetheless. He posts pictures from the lake most weekends. You don't judge him for it. He works hard. He's not reckless. He's just spending the way most people spend, the way you used to spend, before the Sunday morning with the cold coffee. At work, a woman named Melissa gets promoted to director. She drives a leased BMW and just closed on a house in the nicer part of town, the kind with a finished basement and a 3-car garage. People talk about her like she's arrived somewhere. You don't know, because nobody ever does, that her monthly debt payments, mortgage, 2 car leases, a home equity line she used for the kitchen renovation, eat almost 60% of what she brings home. Nobody at the office knows that either. It isn't visible. It never is. Your own numbers are quieter, less impressive at a glance. The retirement account crosses $28,000 on an unremarkable Tuesday. You don't post about it. There's nothing to post. That's the strange part about this stage. There's nothing to announce. Nobody throws a party for an index fund. Nobody congratulates you for not upgrading your car. The system just runs month after month, invisible and unglamorous, while everyone around you is doing something that photographs better. You put $2,400 into your retirement account that year. Somewhere in the same 12 months, Melissa puts a similar amount onto a credit card for furniture. Same number. Same mechanism, in a sense. Money moving out to work on your behalf, or against you, depending on the direction. Neither of you notices the other's number. But the two are pulling in opposite directions, quietly, every single month. Near the end of that second year, your car finally does more than rattle. It won't start one morning in the office parking lot. The repair estimate comes back at $1,900. The transmission. For a moment, standing in the cold with the mechanic's number still open on your phone, it feels exactly like the old fear. The one where a repair bill turns into 3 months of anxiety. Then you remember the account. $4,100 now, built slowly, one automatic transfer at a time. You pay it. You don't buy a new car. You fix the old one, because $1,900 doesn't threaten anything anymore. You didn't expect that to be the moment that mattered. You thought it would be something bigger. Level 3. When the number becomes real. You're 41 when the account crosses $100,000. You notice it on a random weeknight, scrolling through the app before bed. You stare at the number for a while. You expect to feel something enormous. You don't. Not right away. You just feel quiet. Then, slowly, something like disbelief. 5 years earlier, $100,000 would have sounded like a number that belonged to other people. People who inherited things. People who did something you hadn't figured out yet. But then the market drops. It happens fast. A correction that wipes 11% off your balance in 6 weeks. The number on the screen falls from just over $100,000 to $89,400. You watch it happen in real time, refreshing the app more than you'd like to admit. Derek, over drinks one night, tells you he pulled his 401k contributions down to the minimum. No point throwing money into a fire, he says. You understand the impulse completely. Paul says something different when you mention it to him. I've been through 4 of these, he says. Every single one recovered. The only people who lost money were the ones who sold. You don't sell. You keep the $310 transfer running, buying into the same funds at lower prices without meaning to, without even really deciding to. It just happens, automatically, the same way it always has. 6 months later, the account is back above $100,000. 8 months after that, it's at $118,000. Around this time, something else happens, smaller, but it stays with you longer than the market drop does. Your father-in-law, visiting for a weekend, notices the old brown wallet you've been using since college. The stitching is coming apart at one corner. He asks, half joking, if you can afford a new one yet. You tell him you can. You just don't need one. He laughs, but there's something else underneath it. A flicker of recognition, maybe respect, maybe just surprise. It's the first time anyone outside your own head has noticed that something about you has changed. Level 4. The crossover. You're 43. The dividend payment lands on a Thursday. $412, deposited automatically, the way it does every quarter now. You almost don't notice it. Then you do the math you've never bothered doing before. Annualized, your investments are now generating more in a year than your car payment costs you in 12 months combined. Money made money without you doing anything that Thursday except existing. It's not enough to live on, not close. But it's the first time the relationship has changed shape. For 36 years, every dollar you had came from hours you traded. Now, for the first time, a portion of it is coming from dollars working on their own in the background, while you sleep, while you're at your desk, while you're doing anything else entirely. That same month, a furnace dies in the middle of a cold snap. $4,300 to replace it. 2 years ago, that number would have needed a plan, a payment split, maybe a loan. Now it's a transfer from savings, followed by a mental note to rebuild the buffer over the next few months. No panic, no spiral, just an inconvenience with a price tag. Melissa's situation, meanwhile, quietly comes apart. She's laid off in a round of corporate restructuring. Nothing she did wrong, just a department getting cut. Word moves through the office fast. Within 2 months, she's selling the BMW lease early to avoid the penalty and putting the house on the market. She was never behind on payments, she just never had room underneath them. You don't feel superior. You think about Paul's line, the one he said years ago without much weight behind it. You didn't get smarter, you just stopped changing the system. You think it applies more to you than you'd like to admit. You weren't disciplined out of virtue. You were disciplined because you automated the decision before you could talk yourself out of it, over and over, for 7 years. The account crosses $240,000 that winter. The Civic, somehow, is still running. 189,000 miles now, level 5, choosing not having to. By 46, something shifts that has nothing to do with a number on a screen. Your manager offers you a promotion, more money, more title, considerably more hours, a role that would mean answering emails at 9 p.m. and traveling 2 weeks a month. 5 years earlier, you'd have said yes without thinking. The raise alone would have justified it. You take 3 days to decide. Then you say no. Not because the money doesn't matter. It's because, for the first time, you don't need it to matter. The account behind you means you can afford to choose the version of your life that includes dinner with your family instead of the version that includes a bigger number and less of everything else. Nobody at the office understands the decision. Derek asks if you're okay, like something must be wrong for someone to turn down more money. You tell him you're fine. You don't explain the rest. That $340,000 sitting quietly in a handful of funds means the promotion was never actually about survival anymore. It was about a choice, and you made it. That same year, your sister calls, quietly panicked, about a $2,800 repair on her roof she can't cover. You transfer it to her the same afternoon, without turning it into a loan, without a spreadsheet of repayment terms. It doesn't touch your life. It changes hers completely. You still drive the Civic. People have started to comment on it, half joking, in a different tone than they used to. It used to read as struggling. Now, somehow, it reads as strange. The guy who could clearly afford something else and doesn't bother. The wallet is still the same one, too. Your father-in-law brings it up again at Thanksgiving, and this time you just shrug. It still works, you say. He doesn't push it, but you can tell he's starting to understand that the wallet was never really about the wallet. Level 6, the part nobody warned you about. By 49, the number is large enough that you stop mentioning it to almost anyone. Not because you're hiding something shameful. It's the opposite kind of silence. The kind where you've realized that most people don't actually want the real answer. They want the answer that fits the story they've already decided about you. Paul retires that spring, at 61. At his small office send-off, someone asks him what he's going to do now. He says he doesn't fully know yet, and for a second, something in his face looks less like relief than you expected. Later, over coffee, he tells you the truth. The money was never the hard part. Figuring out who he is without the job in front of him, that's the part nobody warned him about. You think about that more than you'd like. An old friend from college reaches out that summer, someone you haven't talked to in years. Partway through the conversation, he mentions, carefully, that he's struggling. A layoff, a mortgage he's behind on, a marriage under strain from the stress of it. You want to help. You do help, quietly, without turning it into a lecture. But there's a distance now that wasn't there before, a gap in what the two of you can relate to, and you both feel it, even though neither of you says it out loud. Derek, meanwhile, is still Derek, still upgrading, still enjoying his life exactly the way he wants to. You genuinely don't think he's making a mistake. He's just living a different equation than you are, and he seems happy in it. You've stopped needing him to be wrong for your choices to be right. The account crosses $610,000 that fall. You don't celebrate, you just sit with it for a moment, the way you did at $100,000, except quieter this time. The reaction keeps shrinking as the number keeps growing. At $2,000, you used to feel panic. At $600,000, you mostly feel a kind of stillness. There's a fear underneath the stillness, though, one you didn't expect. Not the fear of not having enough. The fear of losing what took over a decade of unremarkable Tuesdays to build. It sits quietly in the background now, a new kind of weight that replaced the old one. Wealth didn't erase the hard feelings. It just changed which ones you carry. You're 50 now. It's a Sunday morning again. The coffee is going cold again, the same way it always has, because you always get distracted by something before you finish it. Derek posts a picture from a lake house he's renting for the week. You look at it for a second, the way you used to look at the photo of his colonial 14 years ago. This time, nothing tightens in your chest. You just hope he's having a good trip. The wallet is finally starting to fall apart for real. Not the aesthetic kind of worn, but the kind where the seam is actually splitting. You'll replace it this week, not because you finally can, but because you finally decided it's time. It never was about the leather. It was about not needing anyone's permission, including your own, to be seen a certain way. The Civic is gone now, sold 2 years ago at 211,000 miles, replaced by something newer and unremarkable that you paid for outright without thinking twice about the number. None of that is really the point. The point is the version of you sitting at this table 14 years ago, staring at a $150 transfer and feeling foolish about how small it was. That version of you had no idea the number wasn't the important part. The system was. The decision to start at 36 when it felt embarrassingly late, when everyone around you already seemed to have a head start you couldn't see the size of. You didn't get smarter along the way. You just stopped changing the system, one unremarkable month at a time, until the unremarkable months added up to something that no longer needed explaining. If this story made you look at starting late a little differently, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And I'm curious, if you started building real wealth today, at whatever age you're at right now, what would change first? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.